the center of that fuselage were all thrown with seats and everything out of the airplane, which was probably to my benefit. I was laying on the runway, and I knew something horrible had happened. It was still really foggy. You could see the flickering of lights. So I knew there was fire, and I heard people shouting and yelling and so on. As I was laying there in quite a bit of pain, I didn't know what degree of injuries I had. My first conscious remembrance was I ran my tongue over my teeth, and I realized I had some broken teeth. And believe it or not, my first conscious thought was, my mom's going to kill me. She always was concerned about me playing football because I played the trumpet too. And she says, you're going to get your teeth knocked out and you won't be able to play the trumpet. And you know, as a young kid, you know, your parents are always there. And still, you know, when you get in your 50s and 60s, your parents still remind you of those things you did when you were 4 and 5 and 15. But that was my first recollection. And finally, somebody ran up to me and said, you know, here's another one over here. And about that time, they came with a gurney, and people were scooped up, and we were put in ambulances and taken to one of 3 different hospitals. And I ended up at Mercy Hospital. The extent of my injuries were enough to keep me there 2.5 weeks. The primary major injury was a fracture in my back. And so I had to wait until that stabilized, and they manufactured a corset-type brace in order so I could travel. I do recall the tremendous outpouring of grief and of support from the city of Toledo and Bowling Green University. We got letters and cards and notes from people all over the country that had no idea who they are. I still have a bag about this big full of those cards and letters. It's tucked away in my garage somewhere, but I vowed I'd never get rid of that because it always helped me remember how important it is for those people to be in your life. The Red Cross was outstanding, and in most tragedies were there to support us. They clothed us, they gave us luggage, they provided for transportation home. If families were coming out to visit us in the hospitals, they made arrangements to help support families to get there. I left Toledo with my friend Don Adams. We flew home together. We chose to fly. Many took the train. We just wanted to get home. So needless to say, the first takeoff out of Toledo Airport was a little bit tricky. The pilot knew who we were, and he came back and talked to us and reassured us that it wouldn't happen again. And we took his word for it. But it was a white knuckler. So we flew from Toledo to Chicago, and then we flew from Chicago to San Francisco. And my friend Don got off there and flew down to Modesto. So he had to get in one of the little shuttles and make about 14 stops, I think, on the way. So that was a really tough ride for him. I ended up flying to Los Angeles, where I met my mother and my sister, who lived in Southern California. And we spent a few days down there before I returned to San Luis Obispo. It was a long time before I really realized the impact that that event had on the city of San Luis Obispo. I mean, today I can talk to people in my Rotary Club and others who lived here in those days, and they can tell you, like most of us can, when Kennedy was assassinated or 9/11 happened, you remember specifically what you were doing that day, that moment in your life when that thing happened. And that's one of those kinds of events that this city and the people in this community experienced have never forgotten. And that's why this memorial that's being developed and built, as far as in terms of the stadium renovation, is so critically important, so that we as a society and as humanity do not forget those young men that were lost that day. Coming back to Cal Poly, I didn't attend classes right away. I didn't attend classes a lot of times, but but I had a better reason this time. I didn't need an excuse. I dropped a couple of classes. I finished my math classes because I could do those fairly easily, but I did lose a quarter, so I had to go an extra quarter to finish my degree. So getting back to campus, back to school, was really important. And in those days, for good or for bad or for whatever the reasons, there really wasn't kind of the outpouring of support that happens today that we experience with the interventions that are done to help individuals, to help families, to help the people in our lives cope with tragedy, death, and loss, and surviving. You just kind of were made to feel okay, and then you just kind of were expected to move on. And it wasn't typical to Cal. I mean, it wasn't unique to Cal Poly. This is the way we handled tragedy back in the 60s. And fortunately and unfortunately, we all handle tragedy differently. Some of us who survived are still struggling with the fact that we survived. Some of us have taken it as a message, spiritually or however you want to look at it, that there must be a purpose in our life, and therefore we have a responsibility to do something significant with it. Many of us played the next year. That was a very emotional and spiritual experience for those who played. I did not play the next year. I sat out that year and played in 62 and 63. The program took a turn to de-escalate a little bit and kind of regroup and rebuild and redefine the future of Cal Poly football. I think the first major impact for me after the crash was about a year, right around the first anniversary. And I had a major meltdown. I had done pretty well up to that point, but I wasn't playing football that fall, and I think if I had, it would have been easier. But I hit what is called now survivor guilt. You know, surviving something that other people didn't, and trying to figure out why you were chosen to continue to live, and others who really deserve to live died. Especially our married players, our dads. Just a week and a half ago, I had a sudden occurrence happen in my life. Through my son talking with one of my neighbors who lived around the corner, he figured out that my son who he was talking to was my son. And he said, "Oh, you're Greg Stork. You must be Gil's dad, or Gil's son." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you going to the memorial?" And Greg said, "Yes, I'm going." "Why?" He said, "Well, I'm going to be there too." And so my son was trying to figure out the connection, but the connection was that Dan, who lives around the corner from me, is married to Connie Van Horn, who is Gary Van Horn's unborn daughter. Gary's wife was pregnant with their second child, and she was born shortly after, a few months after the plane crash. And here we've been living around the corner from each other for many years.